like to call this meeting to order, sorry. Forgot my cues. Roll call of attendance.
Done.
Thank you. Approval of the agenda.
Move approval.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Motion carries. Approval of the consent agenda.
So moved.
Thank you.
Second?
Thank you. I have a motion and a second. Discussion? I would like to thank, under 4A, all of the people donating grants totaling over $4,000 to our school district. This is an agenda item every month, and it always impresses me how giving our community is, not only in terms of finances we see on the agenda, but in terms of time as well. And so I appreciate all of the financial donations that are listed on the agenda and all the time our community members, parents, and students have donated to our schools and what we're trying to accomplish. I have a motion and a second on the floor. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Presentations and recognitions. Dr. Larson?
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the board. This is always a highlight of the evening in which we have a number of outstanding students and representatives of the school board to be recognized. So board members, can I get you to come out this way, please, and we'll get going on this. Every year we have a Young Writers Conference, or Young Writers opportunity to submit entries. And this year's contest named 32 winning pieces from 374 entries. This was in the area of poetry, persuasive essay, creative nonfiction, short stories, and one-act play categories. In this case, we had 4 students that won prizes. For the Right Now winners, the high school writing contest through the White Bear Center for the Arts, honorable mention, Lucy Ward had A Rocky Trail to Self-Discovery. Award of Merit, Alicia Utek had Turning 17 and Realizing How Society Views Me, creative nonfiction. And an award of excellence given to 2 students who wrote a one-act play. They are Gianni Pauls and Preston Zalecki. Gianni?
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board, Dr. Larson. The agenda says that I'm here to present on the elementary nature trail that we have at O.H. Anderson, and that's partially true, but I'm going to add a little something to it, because really tonight is about recognizing Julie McGraw and all of her work that she has done for us. So I'd like to just share a few things around that. So it is my great honor as principal of O.H. Anderson to recognize Julie for her years of work with the OHA Nature Trail, our prairie, and our school forest. Julie's commitment and dedication to this work has spanned, I think, over 7 years plus, and our school is a better place because of your work, Julie. As a school, we are so fortunate to have this outdoor learning space for our students, and Julie has been a guiding force. So I'd like to share a few things that Julie has done over the years. You may not even be aware of them. First of all, she has set fire to the prairie. Now that, of course, was in part due to prairie restoration and that we have prairie burns and then prairie planting. Julie also brought horses onto school property when there were students present. And that was part of her efforts around our school forest thinning, and Julie organized a horse logging demonstration for all of the students at O.H. Anderson. With her father, she also set up a lumber mill area and cured some wood that was used by Mahtomedi High School students to build furniture for the MAFE auction. Julie's also destroyed some vegetation on the school property, and I brought some for you. A bouquet of buckthorn. Now, buckthorn does happen to be a very invasive species, and so Julie has been instrumental in teaching students, staff, volunteers all about buckthorn removal. And if you have not ever tried it, it is quite an undertaking to do so. In addition, Julie has worked with the Minnesota Youth Corps to replant pine trees. She's helped coordinate our nature trail maintenance, Eagle Scout projects which enhance our outdoor space, and she's been an integral part of our annual Nature Trail Day, and the list could go on and on. So we know that your time commitments for our school district are taking you in other directions, and so we won't see you as much with our nature trail work. But please know that we recognize that you have given of yourself countless hours and time and energy to support outdoor learning for the thousands of students who have gone through O.H. Anderson, and we are forever grateful. Thank you.
But Julie's not the only board member getting recognized tonight. Every year we have a student representative who serves on the school board, gives a monthly report, and is seen as someone that we can rely on for giving a student perspective. Tonight we recognize Audrey Yangfang, so please, Audrey, come forward and receive your bell. The bell is a universal symbol of education, used to symbolize bringing school children to the doors of the schoolhouse, and we want to have the appearance that when we have the bell in our hands, we welcome all students into our environment and our community. So, Audrey, congratulations. Julie, congratulations. And Gianni, congratulations. Could I get everyone to come forward for a picture, please? What? Lynn, you want to take a picture? Congratulations.
All right, good evening. My name is Michael Conley. I'm the president of MAIF, and we are here. I'm here along with Catherine Sawyer, who's our operations director, to give you guys an update on what we've been doing over the last, well, really, it's been over the last couple of months, but it's been a year to get us to this point. We recently had our Legacy Night celebration at the JX Ventures venue in Stillwater. It was a new venue for us this year, and we raised right around $226,000 this year, which is pretty much in line with what we did last year. And about 55,000 of that will go directly back into the schools in grants. The other money will be spent on scholarships and other grants, but 55,000 was earmarked as fund a need directly towards grants. So that will be coming next year for grants, along with what we sponsored this year in grants, which we'll talk about in a little bit. The other nice thing we did this year that was different is we brought students and a teacher up on stage to give a little speech about what they've done, what they've learned. It was really nice to have the personal touch and them explaining what we do in the schools at this benefit. And we also had a video that Chase Sullivan, one of our graduating seniors, created for the presentation at the benefit, and we're going to show that video right now. Oops.
José hizo un reportaje. Sí, dice travieso. Travieso.
E-I-Y sound, and it makes it say S. Yeah, say the whole word now. Sieve? Yeah.
So the video highlighted some of the grants that we had funded last year, and I just wanted to give you a sample of grants that we are funding through this year's grant cycle. The high school, as many of you may know, is moving to a new orientation program for incoming ninth grade students called the Link Crew program. And we are providing the funds for 2 staff members to attend the training of this very highly regarded program. At the middle school, we are very excited to be sending 2 teachers to a 5-day reading and writing workshop at the Teachers College of Columbia University in New York City this summer. And this institute is committed to training teachers to a writing process that helps students become more powerful writers themselves. We are also excited to be funding a grant at OHA that will impact all literacy classes for grade 3. The funding will cover materials to create reading activity centers for each 3rd grade classroom. And finally, at Wildwood, we are very happy to report that all 2nd grade classrooms are already utilizing their point-to-view document cameras that we funded this grant cycle. In total, we were able to fund 20 grants amounting to $87,000. Very exciting. And finally, I wanted to give you an update on our scholarships that were just awarded last night. MAFE's scholarship chair, Sarah Johnson, and her committee dispersed awards valued at $48,000 to a total of 31 students this year. So, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda, we have outdoor learning spaces. Dr. Larson?
Thank you. Madam Chair and members of the board, I'd like to call Acadia to the podium. Acadia was instrumental in working with the outdoor classroom spaces, and she's here to share some of the information about how they've been used before. Acadia is an old friend of the board, having sat where Audrey is sitting right now. So last year you were there. So welcome back, and I'm glad you're here.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to be here to talk about something that I'm really passionate about, and that is outdoor learning. So I want this to be more of a conversation, so if you guys have any ideas or questions, just feel free to interrupt. It's totally okay. So just to start out, I want to ask you guys a question. How has the outdoors impacted your life? Do you guys have any stories of when you were a child, or when you, just a time that going outside really made your day, or any memories that you want to share with me?
Sure. Yeah, every time I go outside and smell the air and see the sky, it just makes me feel good. Today, for example.
Yes, exactly.
It's beautiful.
I think many of the things that motivate you motivate me.
I understand. Yes.
I grew up and still have a Canadian island, very remote. It's like the boundary waters, if you can visualize the boundary waters. And the most important thing to begin the day is to go out and determine what the weather is going to do.
Anyone else want to share?
The outdoors reminds me of raising my children and the amount of time we spend outside playing in the sandbox. They love to play in the rain with the umbrellas and the puddles and things like that. So the outdoors brings lots of fond memories of my childhood and then raising my children.
Awesome. Well, like all of you guys, I have a lot of fun memories outdoors, and it has really changed the way that I see the world and how I see myself. So here's my story. So my name is Acadia Hegedus. I'm a senior at the high school, and the natural world has been a place of peace and solitude for me, but also it has been a place of learning. So last year, I took an environmental science course at the high school, and we went outdoors at least once a week, sometimes even every day of the week. Everyone was a lot more engaged, I found, just because we were doing a lot more hands-on, team-based learning, doing a lot of projects. We weren't doing a lot of reading textbooks. It was more sort of working together to solve different problems. And I know we did like a tree survey where we all had to band together and collect all this data. And so, yeah, it was a really awesome class. I absolutely loved it. And now you might say, well, of course, this is an environmental science course, so it should be taught outside because we're learning about the environment. But actually, anything can be taught outside, really. You can teach math, you can teach English, you can teach world languages, you can teach science. You can teach anything outside. And this is what brought me here today. So we have amazing access to the outdoors on all of our campuses. I know we have the school forest at OHA. We have the beautiful outdoor classroom at the high school. But the only class that I've ever encountered so far in my high school career, which is almost over, that has really utilized the outdoors is this environmental science course. And it wasn't until my junior year in high school. So, I mean, if you think that's, I went through a lot of, I mean, I've been here since, first grade, and it's my first class that I really, really got to use the outdoors. So today I'm gonna ask you guys to take action. And so my dream is to have some of you inspired to help me bring the outdoor learning more into our district and support it in our curriculum. So the outdoors has many, many benefits, and I'm just gonna focus on 3 today that I feel are most important. First, going outside supports creativity. It also increases student engagement. And finally, it reduces stress levels. So there was a 2012 study done by a cognitive psychologist from the University of Utah, and they gave divergent thinking tests to a group of participants, and they basically found that, so they gave the test before going backpacking, and then they gave it after 4 days out on the trail. And they found that backpackers were 50%, on average, 50% more creative after spending 4 days out on trail. So teaching outside obviously is not going to be 4 days straight in the outdoors, but the effect is still there. So how does this work? Well, we see that when we go outside, our prefrontal cortex, which is sort of the front and the frontal lobe, that is decreases in activity. And this is the center for multitasking and higher order thinking. So when we go outside, this part of our brain sort of decompresses and relaxes, and it actually enables us to think more outside the box and to be more creative. And why is this important? Well, as we all know, we need innovators in our society. We need people who can think differently and solve all of the problems that we have. So this is why supporting creativity is so important through outdoor learning. Also, teaching outside increases student engagement, and this is shown as students remember more material later on. So there was a study done in southern Sweden by 2 researchers, one from the Linköping University of Sweden and another from the Macquarie University in Australia. And basically they took 85 students, and they were in like sophomore, freshman year in high school. So 85 students, and they split them up into 2 different groups. Okay, so one group they mostly taught indoors, and the other group they taught mostly outdoors. And they basically compared their understanding and compared what they remembered. And basically they found that 6 months after the course, the students that had been taught outside remembered the material with more detail. And although the understanding was the same, they just could recall it better through these interviews. So why is this important? Well, students shouldn't just forget the material after the test, right? So if students are engaged when they're learning the material, if they're doing a hands-on activity, if they're really putting in the work to learn and not just being talked at, they're actually going to remember the material longer down later in their life, as opposed to just forgetting it. So it's really, really important, and it's awesome that they can do that. So the third benefit that I would like to discuss is the reduction in stress that happens when people go outside. So you guys probably have felt this, but they have actually done, well, there's one specific study done in Korea, published in the Korean Institute of Radiology in 2010, and they actually measured the brain activity of participants. So they had participants, first they looked at a natural picture. So it was like a picture of a mountain or a lake or just something outdoors, very calming. And then they had the participants look at an urban picture. And this urban picture had, cars and, buildings and everything that comes with urban life. And they compared, they took a functional MRI scan and they compared the blood flow. And if you just look at this is from the study, there is drastic changes just in what parts of the brain are activated. And this is just merely looking at it. So something that's very, very interesting is there's this one part of the brain called the amygdala, and it's associated with fear and anxiety and sort of like that anxious stress response. And they found that actually when the participants were viewing the natural picture, that part of the brain was had less blood flow to it, which is super interesting. Okay, so that would make us think maybe going outside reduces stress. So to sort of add on to this study, I did my own research in the high school, and I gave this survey. So I gave this survey to our 2 current environmental science classes. So I gave them this before going outside, and then I gave them this after going outside. And basically they were just self-reporting their stress level, trying to quantify how stressed, how not stressed they were. So these were my findings. So I did this 2 different times, and it was a total of around 30 students. So on the left side, we have when they went outside for a sit spot, and so the average self-reported stress level is on the y-axis, and then the survey 1 is the left 2 bars. So as you can see, it's a drastic decrease in average stress level, which is very, very interesting, but what we would expect based on the Korean study. And then the second survey, what I did was the students were actually going outside to discuss for a final project. So they were a lot more sort of engaged and working together, and we still do see that reduction in stress, but it was less so than the first time. And also, of course, there's discrepancies, and these were different times of the year. Students' stress levels were different based on schoolwork and whatnot, but both times they did decrease, which I think is very, very promising. So basically, going outside reduces stress, and we can see this from both my surveys and a lot of online research that I've done. And so why is this important? Well, our school system is extremely full of stress. And of course, a certain amount of stress is important, right? We need stress to get things done, to study. We need stress to complete tasks on time. But I think the stress, especially at the high school level, gets a little excessive. And I think that doing any measure to sort of support a reduction in stress should be really, really looked at and taken advantage of, just for the mental and physical health of our students. So yeah, super interesting what the outdoors does. So the outdoors really works. Learning outdoors has so many positive benefits, but it is against the norm. As I talked about before, the first time that I encountered the outdoors, the first time I encountered a class that heavily used the outdoors was in my junior year of high school. So it's not something that our district is very, very involved in right now. I mean, I know we have a couple days, you know, like when I was in O.H. Anderson, they had like one day where we'd spend it all outside, which is great, but on the whole, we're not really utilizing it as best as we could. And, but it really is in the best interest of everyone, both our students and our teachers. So there's just a little example in Plymouth University in England did a sort of learning experiment to 40,000 students, and they basically exposed them to a completely new outdoor curriculum. And after the year was over, 90% of the schools that participated agreed that the outdoors was useful for curriculum delivery. So after these teachers were trained in using the outdoors, they actually found that it helped them teach. So outdoor learning works. So it makes the material more interesting, more meaningful, and more memorable. So what is my sort of goal with this? Like, why am I presenting to you guys? Well, first, I want you guys to be aware of the amazing opportunities and the benefits of teaching outside. But also, I would like to ask you guys if, as a district, we could open up a position to have a outdoor learning sort of expert to come in and work for us, and they could help teachers at staff development days, help them learn how to use the outdoors more effectively, as well as helping rewriting curriculum. I know we do that. It cycles through every couple years. And this doesn't even have to be a paid position. I've already contacted people at Hamline University and UMD, and they said that they would be happy to set up an internship for a grad student that's studying environmental education. And they would be more than willing to help us out. So I just want your permission to bring someone in and just really, really just start this movement. And I know it's a small movement right now. It's not widespread, but I think that it's really, really promising. And so the last and final reason why I believe that we should promote outdoor education in our district is to help children develop their relationship with the natural world. So as we all know, climate change is one of the most threatening issues to our time. And you guys might not have to make as drastic changes as my generation will need to. It's more of the problem of the kids my age. And it calls for a drastic change in our economic systems, the ways in which we interact with our environment, and just the ways in which we survive. And I think right now you guys are in the position with the power, being on the school board of an amazing school, Mahtomedi. I know it's one of the best schools in the state. You guys have the power and influence to make some amazing, amazing changes. And I think that these changes will have ripple effects across the state because people do look up to us. And so if we can allow our students to develop this relationship through education, this relationship with the natural world, they will just be that much more prepared to address the environmental problems of the future and just to protect our environment for future generations. So thank you so much for having me. If you guys have any questions, I know I went through a lot of research and numbers. If anyone has any questions or thoughts or anything they want to ask or comment or.
Well, I want to thank you for coming to present. Your presentation was amazing and so reflective of Mahtomedi education, so really great stuff. And I don't want this to come off as making light of your presentation, but maybe we could have a board meeting out in the outdoors, because we do sometimes have a wee bit of stress.
Right.
Yeah, that'd be great.
But thank you very much.
One of the things that the school board spent a lot of time on last year was with our facilities and our abatement bond program and changing the parking lots arrangements at the secondary schools. Also at O.H. Anderson and the district office, and you see some of the pavers there for permeable pavement and so on. But one of the selling points of changing the design that we had to Design M, as you can tell, we went through many iterations of it, was because of the outdoor classroom space at the high school and how important that was and what a value that the board felt that outdoor space was, which I think was the tipping point in terms of the decision-making that we had. And so for that, congratulations to you and the other students who came to the board and spoke to that.
Yeah.
Regarding the curriculum issues, Ms. Vicker is our Director of Teaching and Learning, and if you give the contact information, we can incorporate that to an extent.
Okay. Awesome. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you,
you.
Katie. Nice presentation.
All right. Next on the agenda is public comment. This is an opportunity for members of the public to address the board on items on the agenda. We have 3 committee members who wish to address the board tonight. However, as you look at the laws around public comment, the school board is prohibited by law from discussing concerns about individual employees or students in the public meeting. So the 3 people who have put paperwork forward all wish to address a student concern or an employee, which we cannot address in a public meeting like this. So we will ask that those people contact Dr. Larson. I'll hand these forms to him, so we'll expect to hear from you. He can set up a meeting with each of you, and I would be glad to join those meetings as well. But in this public forum, we cannot discuss individual students or employees.
Actually, Madam Chair, I will contact each of the people here. They left their contact information, so do not feel like you won't need to contact me. I'll make sure that I contact you. I'll send you an email tonight with some availability for next week.
Next, report from student representative. Audrey?
Yeah, things at the high school are going really well. Everyone's really enjoying having the nice weather. I think springtime is going well. Legally Blonde came out, I think, a week and a half ago now, and it went over really well. I think everyone loved it. They're just waiting for the video to be up on YouTube to watch it. The students are who missed it. Prom was last weekend, and we had our grand march. The theme was a walk in Central Park, so student council members spent their whole day Friday taking buckthorn from the outdoor space, and we put it in Christmas tree holders, and we decorated the gym as if we were in the forest. So that was work, but it was fun. We have started AP testing. This is our final week of it, and I think most of the tests that the high school offers, the classes are done now, which is a relief to students. I think that lessens the load for the rest of the year. SAD, Students Against Destructive Decisions, had their Stay Safe over prom, where everyone could take a button and promise that they would stay safe, which was clever. The boys and girls golf teams and baseball and softball teams are doing very well. 8th grade orientation is coming up, as well as the senior send-off. And I think students are really just getting ready to wind down the year, preparing for finals.
How many days of school are left?
19.
But who's counting?
Not me.
Thank you, Audrey, for your service this year.
It's been so much fun. I just thank you guys so much for having me. It was just, I've learned so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Audrey.
All right, next on the agenda is approval of the minutes. We have 3 sets of minutes to approve. April 13th, a regular meeting, April 18th, a special meeting, and April 27th, a study session. Is there a motion?
So move.
A motion to
Second.
second to approve all the minutes. Any discussion? I want to thank Laura for her continued work in minute taking. It is not an easy job, and she does very well at it, so thank you, Laura. All those in favor of approving all 3 sets of minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next on the agenda, discussion information items, calendar of events for those last 19 days. Dr. Larson?
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the board. The scholarship night that was mentioned earlier with the MAVE presentation happened on Wednesday, and it was a terrific outpouring of community support for our wonderful students. On Tuesday of next week, we have our first Innovation Task Force meeting. That will be an organization that we look at ways to become more innovative in the school district. It'll be the first meeting. It'll be kind of setting some parameters and some definitions as to where we are. Friday the 19th, and that is the Fun Fair, which is a great opportunity at Wildwood, a huge community event. There are hundreds of people, maybe even hitting into the thousands. And then on Saturday, May 20th, the school board and I will be actively participating, or wishing we were, the Mahtomedi Fun Run, the 8.32 kilometers. It's about 5 miles. We had, I'm going to say, 40-some people last year that did it, or is it a little bit more than that? A little more? This is done by Nicole Flessner and Patrick Crothers. We get the permits through the Mahtomedi City, and it's a great event. I know that some of the board members participated last year. Rain or shine, 9 o'clock, park in the high school parking lot and walk up to St. Andrews where we're going to start the event. Also, you can tell that there are a whole host of concerts still coming up. And then one thing that I think is in its 5th year, which is an absolute terrific evening, a terrific time, is on Tuesday, May 30th. It's the MEA. They sponsor the end of the year picnic celebration. This is a picnic celebration that the entire community is invited to. It's the Tuesday after Memorial Day. It's at the high school commons. We have hundreds of people there. It's great to see we have staff members there, school board members. A lot of students will have kids with their families on their way to baseball practice or something like that on the way back. A terrific event. Please try to attend if you can. And then finally, a culmination of the school year will be on Saturday, June 10th with graduation.
Any other events board members like to call out, Kevin?
On Tuesday, May 23rd at 7 p.m. is the 11th or 12th, I'm not quite sure, 12th, Judd, for the Hill Legacy. Anyway, 11 or 12 years, we've celebrated this. It's at Century College in the library, and all are invited. And it's the Hill Legacy Award is a volunteer. It's to celebrate volunteerism in our communities. Our communities, it's a shared event between the White Bear Foundation, the Mahtomedi Foundation, and the Century College Foundation. So the people that are being honored, George Hill it's a memorial honor for George Hill. And Bill Foussard of the Best Western Country Inn is also being honored. So please come. There are refreshments, and it's a great place to network and talk. And 11. Thank you, Judd.
Anything else? All right. Next item is the equity curriculum review process.
Madam Chair and members of the board, every year we review different curriculum and we align these with the academic standards that are required that the state puts forward. And we use the best practices and we research, and that's what is going to do the best thing to support student learning. The last couple of years we've really focused on looking at our curriculum through the equity lens about providing opportunities to all students with what we've done. This year, as you can tell from the packet, we reviewed math, student support, gifted and talented, and we'll continue with the language arts review. All of this is through that lens of equity. And so Lynn Beeker here, our Director of Teaching and Learning and Accountability, is here to share the information that we have about what we've done. So, Lynn?
Thank you, Dr. Larson.
Madam Chair and members of the board. I just wanted to share briefly with you about some of the outcomes from this year, and then also the continuation and next steps in the other areas. And looking at it always through that equity lens and some of the ways that we have done that in the past. This year, as Dr. Larson was saying, we started with the math journey, or the mathematics part of it, and when we go into the reviews, we start out with more of the research, the book studies, some of the data, we look at that. The second year was the language arts that I'll expand more on, and so we'll be continuing that even to the third and what we're going to be doing there. Then the gifted and talented was kind of moved up a little bit in the sense because of the mandate from the State Department on needing to have a process of identification. So the true year that we will really be going through that study of the gifted and talented will be next year as we look at the service models and what kind of services and support we have in place. The student support service it was in the first year, we just started out with that. We will be continuing with a lot of the things with the responsive classroom and that. The year one, like I said, we look at what are the best practices, what's the research out there, what are the recommendations that we hear from, the state, the districts, anybody around, looking at what's happening, what's making a difference. And we always look at that through the lens of equity, and we want to make sure that we are balancing for all students as we go through. The second year is really when you start to get into the more of the implementation of what we found out were some of the best practices and things that we wanted to put in place, and structuring our staff development, our training, the support for whoever is involved with it. Because typically the first year you might have a smaller group looking at the research and the data, and then the second year you might expand that to the whole grade level, or it could be the departments, the whole science team at the high school, or whatever it would be. The third year, which is the one that we're moving into with the language arts piece of the review, we were able to have a language arts coach this last year at the elementary buildings, but then next year, with our third year, we'll be looking at those leaders that we trained and how can they bring that information back to the PLC, but then also how can we bring in some other staff development and training to really support some of the things that we were putting in place. And then the fourth and the fifth year, we hope that some of the things with this training and any kind of staff development or PLC work they're doing, that this is something where they can really solidify their practices of what they're working towards. Then again, it comes back up to the year one where we began the curriculum cycle again. So it's really never ending. It continues on. And more of the goals we were looking at, we have to look at what do we want the students to know and be able to do? What are the best practices? Looking at, are we addressing the needs for all the kids, and looking across the board from the kids that are struggling to the kids that are accelerating in that certain area. So we really want to look at that lens of equity. Then looking at what strategies could we put in place. And that's where it really comes to that staff development and training that we have to strategically place throughout the year, because there's a lot of needs. So you kind of have to balance when do we have that time to actually put some of the staff development and training in. And then looking at, with the equity lens of making sure that we are engaging, challenging, and inspiring the students, and looking at through a growth mindset of, we want to continue to develop that growth mindset. So you've seen this slide a few different times where we talk about the equity. It doesn't necessarily mean the equal pieces of it. And some things that I want you to look at when you look at that picture is giving the students what they need. You can notice on the slide or the picture to the right, it's different for every case there. So some may need additional support. Some may need a challenge, and others have the additional support. But we really have to look at it, what is it that we're doing for all kids? So we continually bring that back. This was one of the quotes from our math review when we were looking at the equity practices and some of the things if you were dividing up the students, and I'll just let you read that on your own. But the tracking piece of it, as we looked at tracking, we also looked at when you track it or you group in that sense from his quote, you are actually looking at less rigorous and more, less rigorous materials, so then you are not teaching to that high expectation. And when we looked at Hattie's work, one of the critical factors is looking at what is the high expectation for the students and making sure that you were doing that. So lowering expectations really will hold a student back. So as we were looking at how do we make sure that we are not grouping to the level that we may be actually holding kids back, where you will need to present the materials and see if they can rise to that challenge of the material. Then the research that we also looked at within the mathematical practices was the principles to action. I shared a couple of the books one time when I was just briefly talking about the math review, and Joe Bowler's Mathematical Mindsets, which really focuses more on that growth mindset piece. And the team thought they were excellent books as we went through it. The other book that we were looking at was the Detracking for Excellence and Equity. And then Hattie's Effect Size, Visible Learning for Teachers, is another book that we use for almost all of the reviews. I also brought in Hattie's book that we started with, Visible Learning, and this covers the 800 meta-analyses that he has used to look at what impacts classrooms the most. And when we went through the different things on here, it could be for ability grouping, it could be things on concept mapping, feedback, what are things that really impact students. And actually, if you were to read this from cover to cover, it's not that exciting. It's more about the research. So I definitely would recommend looking it up and saying, okay, you're looking at a certain strategy. Is that effective? And how would you put that in place? But I also made a copy of one of the, I'll hand this out here, one of the variables impacting student achievement. And we had staff look at this and see if they could circle it. I actually circled the answers for you, so you didn't have to go through the whole book here. But we had staff look at that to say what really impacts student achievement. And if you were looking at some of them, I would have guessed, in certain areas that there would have been high impact, when truly it was more in the medium to low impact range as he had done the study. And he went this 15 years of research working on this. And what he found that was the ability grouping was a 0.12 effect size. And if you're looking at an effect size that makes a difference in Hattie's work, it should be over a 0.40. And that's kind of that hinge point or the tipping range where if it's over a 0.4, then it can have some impact, or you should probably bring it into your classroom that way. Some of the things that were over the 0.43 are like expectations, teachers' expectations. Formative evaluation is a 0.9. So looking at how do we look at the way we're doing our formative evaluations in the classrooms for all curricular areas and seeing whether or not we can improve on that. So it doesn't matter what subject area, what curricular area you're looking at. These are the strategies and the things that will work within the classrooms. And so we kind of come back to that, where do we feel like we need to change some of our practices or increase in different strategy areas. And this helps with the equity piece of it. So next steps, we looked at K through 5, the implementation plan, and I'm lumping everything together here for math, reading, and some of the GT services and support services. But we have the supplemental and enhanced math reading groups, which is the WIN time, which we're going to continue to work on. Right now we have a structure where we can help the students that maybe are struggling in reading or math, and they will receive those additional services. But we're going to look at the structure of what we're doing in the rest of the students during the day and what do they need, at the other levels within the classroom. Before school, we have the supplemental math and reading instruction for kids that would be needing additional time, and that is at Wildwood, that they're doing some of the sessions there for the math and reading. Then we have the targeted services, which we narrowed the targeted services focus this year, looking at what our need was before 3rd grade and focusing on that read well before 3rd grade. We'll have, it's called iRead, which is an interactive reading instruction program, where once they go through this adaptive technology program, it will also give you an assessment of where the child is at, so then the teacher can use that in small groups, break that down and do some of the summer instruction. We've had this year, over 75 students have signed up for that, for the summer work within the iRead, which is, it's quite a bit higher than we've ever had in the past. And so we're looking at the technology tools and the interest for the kids in that. It's a really engaging program. Minneapolis uses it, and so we did a little research on that to see, okay, let's try this and see how things would go for the summer. The responsive classroom consistency, we're going to work with elementaries across the board within the classroom. We started the responsive classroom a while ago, so we want to make sure that it's happening with fidelity across all the classrooms. The PBIS is, the positive supports that we are putting in place. We're looking a little bit more on the social and emotional and how we can make sure that we're meeting the needs of the students in that area. And then the GT, like I said, was just starting with the just a few meetings, more on the service identification plan, and then moving forward on what kind of services will we be putting in place the following year. Secondary implementation plan is the supplemental reading classes, the language arts. They're developing rubrics, assessments. They're also working on how they can look at other resources. And so, say if a student, they were reading maybe one novel. Now they're going to look at giving choices for the kids, looking at the concepts and the ideas that they're trying to teach, but give the kids a choice on which novel that they would use to actually get that point across. Then the supplemental math class, we're going to continue to enhance that. Unpack the math standards is kind of some of the next steps, and we're looking at how we're identifying the power standards. When power standards would be considered, these are standards that they're really the building blocks. You need the core standards. All standards are important, so I'm not going to tell them don't. They need to do all the standards, but what are the ones they really have to know? And the power standards are solid ones as the kids move on. And we're looking at that with the math part of it and talking about some of the math talks, and that's part of the staff development. But accelerated math, honors English. Jen's been doing a lot of work with how do we work with the honors English classes to make sure that we are increasing the rigor for the students in those classes. And so she's been teaming with the teachers throughout to really hone in on the skills for what do they need to know in order to work with what the students in the honors in English class. Also with the social study and science, she's been doing a lot of work with independent learning projects to help the teachers set those up for the social studies and science if they feel that the student needs to be challenged in that class, and then she will work with them and team together on setting up those independent learning projects. But it's a start, and what we will be doing is looking at more as we continue on. Some of the others that you probably know about are the honors and the AP classes, credit recovery programs. The science program it's an option for all students to take the Fab Lab class, but we're looking at from the equity lens, how can we create programs where every child will get a chance to go in there and not as just an elective. So we're going to pull the high school science teams together and look at how can we set this up so that every child will be able to experience the Fab Lab before they leave the high school. It's just such an amazing learning space. And now after Acadia's presentation on outdoor learning, I'm going to have to figure out how to incorporate that too. So we'll work on that but the science team is going to get together even at the end of this year to really begin some of the planning for that. And then continue the work with the restorative practices. A little bit of the professional development that we're doing. I talked a little bit about the literacy leads, but they're the team, if I could explain it from the language arts point of view, when the second year happened after the language arts review, they felt like they needed a lot of staff development, training, support. So we had 2 literacy leads from every classroom that would get together for one day a month. They would look at what are some of the things that we wanted to put in place, such as was the daily 5, or how do we differentiate for small group work. So then they would get the training on that. The afternoon they would work on some sort of the lessons or how they would bring it back to their professional learning teams. Then they bring it back to their professional learning teams, share this information so that across the board everybody has this information. Then sometimes on staff development days, they would decide, okay, this is something that I think I need to know a little bit more information about, and then they would devote like a half a day of staff development day to work on whatever the new literacy strategies were, things they were putting in place. Last year, we were fortunate to have the literacy coach. She was constantly there with the training and the staff development. Next year, she will be in a classroom. She'll be a wonderful teacher, but I know the teachers will miss her for that support and that staff development training. But she'll still help us out a little bit as we go through and make sure that they continue with some of that staff development on the staff development days more so. The secondary language arts, I talked a little bit about that, of how they're looking at different novels, and they want to look at increasing student engagement through the absent narratives, and we're going to bring in Minnesota Humanities Center starting in the fall to do some training on what they should be doing and looking for. The Language Arts High School, Middle School Power Standards and Formative Assessments, really refining, since formative assessments is such a critical thing for looking at how, with student achievement, they are zeroing in on that quite a bit this next year and working together in buildings and PLC teams. Mathematics teams are now developing their professional development plans, so we'll have a little bit more for you starting next fall. But they're coming up with some great plans and great ideas as I've been going to the different meetings on numbers talks, differentiation. It's kind of exciting to see some of the things they'll be bringing in. I talked a little bit earlier about the thinking maps training, which is really putting together the how you're thinking about your thinking and having more of a consistent theme that way. We're going to have Jen's going to be going to some of that training, and hopefully we can get a couple other teachers to go to that training in the fall. But we'd like to bring back some of that higher level thinking as their problem solving and brainstorming ideas. Then continuing with the small group literacy, we'll do that even if without the literacy coach, but I think we'll be able to work on what they believe they need to do at the teachers as we're going through. And then some of the restorative practices training. Next year, the math teams will be building their plans, like I said. The GT will develop more of a service plan. We'll have, I'm going to talk a lot about that because Jen will get a chance to share some of that. But the language arts and social studies, we're going to look at reading across the content area, evaluating the resources and looking at them through that lens of equity, and then also, are we differentiating like we should be within the classrooms? The health and phy-ed, they will have new standards, so we have to align and implement the new standards. The high school science, talked a little bit about the equitable access for the Fab Lab. Support services is looking more into the responsive classrooms across all grade levels, making sure that's happening, and then the restorative practices. And then the other one would be one that recently we were looking at the media center of how do we create a flexible learning environment and more of a student center, flexible learning environment for the middle school and high school. So we're bringing together a team of teachers and the career and college counselor and administration to talk about what can we do to really change that learning environment. And we'll start with some of the meetings this spring and continue on for that. So that's just a brief summary of some of the things that we have done this year and a few things that we'll be doing next year. As I was adding to that list for next year, I thought, oh, I'm going to need a few more days on my calendar to fit it all in. But do you have any questions?
Any comments or questions from board members?
It's interesting in the sheet that you handed out, just kind of reviewing it, how it says reducing class size has a low impact. It's one of the variables that has a low impact on student achievement. How are they defining that as far as?
You'd have to read the section on there, but it didn't have a great impact on whether or not a student would achieve at the level they needed to by a larger class size or a smaller class size. It was more of the way the teacher was doing the instruction and evaluating where they were at. Obviously, if you had, 40, 50 kids, it would be hard to do a formative assessment and make changes with your instruction. But I think they were basing it on, when people say, well, we need a smaller class size to really make a difference here. With a few students, it wasn't impacting the learning of the students on that. Go ahead. Yeah.
Hattie's work, my understanding, is all meta-analysis work. So he is looking at existing studies that are done across multiple studies and pulling conclusions from that. And so one of the issues that can happen with that is those studies aren't replicated studies. This study used these parameters, this study used those parameters. And so it's hard to pull, what is the ideal class size? I think that's kind of what you're looking for. Should it be 23 in third grade? Should it be 33 at third grade? There are lots of impacts there. And it's hard to tell, as Lynn said, without going into the chapter that he's written. And there are a couple other good sources that deal with sort of that meta-analysis of that might be good for us to look at as we talk, because we've been talking class size a lot as a board recently. So maybe, Lynn, could
I
you...
certainly can make copies of that, too.
Could you scan that part of the book and send it to us as a PDF, maybe with the board notes on Friday, so we could look at the class size piece? Would that be helpful, Kevin? Is that
Yes.
kind of what you're getting at?
Yeah.
And I mean, I think we have put a lot of emphasis on that, and yet, this just kind of stood out to me like, wow. So the other question I have is on the restorative practices. Are we currently doing any of that work in our high school?
At the high school, they did have somebody from MD come in and train a few staff on some of the circle, leading a circle. And they're looking at parts of what we would be doing with these restorative practices. But I don't believe they've mapped out exactly what they're doing. Beth, have they, for that piece of it?
We're currently working on that. We're looking at staff surveys, we're looking at student surveys, and then looking at restorative practices to identify what's currently in place and what needs to be put in place. So we're really at the initial stage. As Lynn said, we had, I think, almost 20-some staff that did go through a full one-day training in order to help staff understand what restorative practices are. And then with that group, their role has been to really help educate the rest of the staff. And then from there, we'll look at identifying, like I said, what's in place, what needs to be in place, and then closing some of those staffs. I think there's elements of it there, but it's not consistent across the board with all situations in all classrooms.
So there's parts that we may use and there's others that we may not, but I think the whole outcome and the goal was to really build a community where everybody feels like they are part of that community.
I for one would like more information on that as you go forward and learn more. I'd like to really get I believe I know what this is, and I'd like to see how it's actually working for us in the schools.
I'd like to add that the work that you do around the curriculum reviews that you're presenting tonight really shows a fuller picture of what a teacher's life is like. I think the community and the parents often think a teacher is a person who stands in front of a classroom and works with students, but there's a whole lot of other things that happen to make them qualified to do that work and continue to learn and grow themselves. They're taking their work in child psychology and using that and applying it here. They are using feedback, they're responding to things, they've got context things to consider. And this is really important work that's sort of hidden from all of us and the public and the parents. And I just really applaud your work and the work of our teachers because, I mean, the things you're talking about happening after a full day of teaching or on a staff development day when the kids and the parents are off on vacation, but the teachers are still working. And when people think about teachers, they think they're a 9-month contract, and they are doing so much work in the summers. And this work reflects that deep learning, deep thoughtful professionalism of our teachers in our district. So I thank you for leading that work, and please thank the teachers for their work as well.
I'm glad you mentioned that about the summer, too. We have summer curriculum writing, and a lot of the teachers have applied for that. I mean, they are really working hard to really do what's best for the kids continually changing. So, thank you.
Very good work. Thank you, Lynn. All right. On to action items. The first action item is under personnel. Approval of resolution to terminate non-renew probationary teaching contracts.
Yes, Madam Chair and members of the board, there are two teachers here that will not be renewed. The resolution relating to the termination and non-renewal of the teaching contract of Taryn Coberly, a probationary teacher, and the contract of Rebecca Anderson, a probationary teacher. Be it resolved by the School Board of Independent School District Number 832 that pursuant to Minnesota Statute 122A.40 Subdivision 5, the teaching contract of these two who are both probationary teachers in the Independent School District Number 832 is hereby terminated at the close of the current 2016-2017 school year. Be it further resolved that written notice be sent to said teachers regarding termination and non-renewal of his or her contract as provided by law, and that said notice shall be in substantially the following form. It's a letter that notifies them of the facts. They may officially request the school board give its reasons for the non-renewal of the teaching contract. However, such request should be received within 10 days after the receipt of this notice. So the recommendation is to approve the resolution as presented.
Move approval. Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. I have a motion and second on the floor. Any discussion? Mike?
Were these long-term subs or something? Is there a reason?
One was and one was not.
All those in favor of the motion on the floor, please say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Next is recommendation to approve contract status for licensed personnel moving from probationary status to continuing status for the 27-18 school year. Dr. Larson?
Thank you. Madam Chair, members of the board, here there are 12 different teachers that are recommended to moving from probationary status to continuing contract status. Elisa Giuliani, Hans Harlan, Beth Horhan, Jen Israel, Bethany Johnson, Dan Kazar, Holly Packard, Jeffrey Sandsgaard, Aaron Schneiders, Maya Kostelek, Amy Turner, and Brittany Weber. The recommendation is to approve as presented.
Motion? Move approval. Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. Discussion?
Do you want to or you want me to?
Well, I guess I'm a little confused because there's one position that I thought we were going to talk about in budget. Is that not the case?
Item D is on our budget list, and that conversation has not been completed, and the implications of that position on the budget need to be discussed.
So what are you making a motion to make a change, to amend the motion? Or are you asking a question?
I guess I'm not sure what the options are.
Move to remove item D from the motion.
Okay, so you've made a motion to remove item D and deal with that one separately?
At a later date, after we've discussed.
So the motion is right now is to approve all of them. So I think you need to remove them and make a second motion of how you want to deal with that. So I think what you're trying to do is support the motion except for item D, and then talk about item D and have a separate motion on item D. Is that?
At a later date.
Well, that motion, that would be, yeah, that'd be your motion next. So first we've got to remove it from the group,
Okay.
and then we'll come to the next motion. So is the motion to remove this person from the group to do a separate motion on that position?
That's your motion. Second.
Okay, so we have an amendment to the motion to remove item D to address second. All those in favor to amend the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Motion carries. So the group except D have been approved as recommended by administration. The motion for D now, you want to?
Discuss item D at a future meeting after we have received more information
On the position.
on the position.
Do we have some time constraints on this?
Yes.
Michelle?
I defer to Nicole on the exact time frame of things, but I believe that with a non-probationary teacher, for this contract, it would be the same as personnel items A.
So what's the time constraint? So Okay, July 1. Because by that point, we should have the budget sorted out, because I think what I'm hearing is the concern is tied to, it's a budget item that's up for, and the administration recommendations as a possible cut, right?
Yes.
And so how that all ties together, I think, is what I'm
Right,
hearing.
I'm assuming that we will settle the budget issues at letter C, the 27-18, O.H. Anderson Elementary open enrollment and recommended budget reductions at that point.
But then that's after we've approved a contract, for which we will discuss.
To me, the later date is here,
The later date, what do you mean?
that we address it right after we do the budget pieces, as
Can we-
opposed to June.
So for right now, can we table item D and make it item 10D1? Can we just move that with that, and then come back to it? Is the board okay with that? Is that what you're saying, Dr. Washington, is that to work through the agenda, and when we get to 10C, when we talk about reductions and open enrollment, we'd have more information at that point in time, and then we would be able to address that. So to just table it temporarily until we know the outcome of 10C. Are you okay?
Yes, I just would like to see the bigger picture and understand how it all fits together, how we're investing. Can we be investing differently, better, more? And I feel like I need a better understanding of that since this came up on that list that Dr. Larson sent us.
Are you okay with that?
Yes.
All right, so we've tabled item 2D, and we'll deal with it after 10C. Okay, item 3 is oh, did I skip that? I'm sorry. Okay, so we have a motion that's been amended, and so we need a vote. Thank you for your help with that. All those in favor, the motion on the floor is to approve the teachers listed under 10A, to move them from probationary status to continuing status, except item D, which has been moved. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Motion carries. Okay. Now on to 3. Recommendation, oh, go ahead.
Okay, this is the recommendation to approve employment for licensed personnel to continue on probationary status for the 2017-18 school year. There are 15 people here. They are Katie Ahrens, Janina Buskovich, Jamie Chamberlain, Ellen Cole, Catherine Fassner, Devin Goose-Humphrey, Laura Harlstead, Kelsey Jolson, Amy Ritchie, Elise Cinco, Jennifer Tantu, William Thorson, Carly Vale, Don Walker, and Kelly Wilkie. The recommendation is to approve as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion? Are there any teachers on, positions on this list that are also included as potential budget cuts that we should be mindful of, or not?
Potentially, and we had talked about PBIS and the positive behavior intervention specialist is one of the things that the board asked for all of the possibilities in including that, so that would be one, that would be a possibility.
Okay. I guess the reason I asked that is following the same philosophy from the last motion. Should we remove that person as well and deal with it, or those positions and deal with it after 3C as well?
Would make sense.
It would, I mean, that seems to make sense to me. I mean, as we're looking at budget cuts, and if that's what's driving, based on that, Dr. Larson, which letters would be impacted by potential budget cuts? What positions? 3?
PBIS.
What letter
Behavior
is
and
that?
school psychologist. And
N? Okay, to be consistent, I'll make the motion to remove, make a motion to amend the motion to remove position N and put it down with, position 2D.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion on the amendment? in favor of the amendment, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Motion carries. So now, we still have the full motion, the amended motion on the floor, which is moving all of 3 except N on to continuing status, or who will continue on probationary status for next year. Any other discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
Motion carries. So we'll return to those 2 in just a moment. Next, we have approval of gifted and talented assessment plan. Dr. Larson?
Thank you. Madam Chair and members of the board, the approval of the gifted and talented identification process has been something that the gifted and talented teacher, along with Director of Teaching and Learning, have been working on. We have to have something here from the Department of Education. It's requested that all the districts include the identification of gifted and talented students as part of the world's best workforce. This presentation is to provide the board and the community with an overview of the district's process and the procedures for the identification of gifted and talented students. At the last study session, we had some conversation about the scope of services. This presentation will touch on it a little bit, but it's not the purpose of it. The board action that's requested will be to approve the identification model. So with that, I turn over to Lynn Beaker and Jen Israel.
Dr. Larson, Madam Chair, members of the board. This is the identification model that we were looking at with the staffing that we currently have with the .8 GT coordinator and teacher within the district. Now, say if any of that were to change, we would have to come back to you with this identification model, propose something different, because the person that is the one that goes through the different assessments actually does some of the identifications of the student. We need to have a GT coordinator or teacher. We had a meeting this morning with the GT parents that were very concerned about the amount of GT support or FTE that we currently have. Now, Jen is .8, and she is working more than an 80-hour week. I mean, she's constantly here working with the students, working with the teachers. I just wanted you to be aware that this identification process would definitely change if things were to change with less staffing. If we were to look at, as we go through our service year and development next year, we will identify the areas that the parents, they were happy after we met with this morning, hearing some of the things. I talked to a few earlier and later this afternoon that they were talking about, thank you for having us be a part of it, and then they also wanted to continue on with some of the work with Jen that she has been continuing with, or working with them on. So I'll turn it over to Jen to talk to you a little bit about some of your questions.
Okay, so I really tried to, from our study session, look at the 5 questions that came from the board and answer those in this discussion, in this presentation, as well as create that model that would be an action item for you to vote on for identification. So one of the questions that was posed by the board in the study session was, what is gifted, what is talented, and what is gifted and talented? As we look at the work of Gagne, the identification of a gifted learner is identified through ability. When we look at the work around a talented learner, we get information around achievement and aptitude. So those students who are in our accelerated math, we are seeing the achievement of that and able to put them in accelerated math based off of achievement and aptitude. When we look at gifted and talented, we want to be able to capture students with ability, achievement, and aptitude. And I highlight that gifted and talented because we can have gifted learners that have the innate ability, but if we are not providing the catalyst of a talent development structure for them, their talents may not truly be fulfilled. So again, a question was posed about what is ability, what is aptitude, and achievement? And where would we collect that information? Ability is that general mental capacity. Aptitude is the ability to learn or develop a proficiency in an area if provided the training on it. And then achievement is any information that we have on a student that they have achieved. So it can be student work, it can be pre and post assessments, it can be standard assessments, and the state has our MCAs as something that falls under the achievement. Another question that was posed was, what is the COGAT and why the COGAT over any other sort of assessment? So the COGAT, which is an acronym for Cognitive Abilities Test, has 3 components, as we discussed in the study session: verbal reasoning, quantitative reasoning, and nonverbal reasoning. And I'll give you just a moment to read through those. So why the COGAT? The COGAT is group administered versus individual. Individual being historically a psychologist works with a student one-on-one to assess them and to score them and identify them as a gifted learner or anywhere in between. Gifted learner, a regular learner, or a special needs. The COGAT can be group administered, it can be also individual. So it has that dual role. In the primary levels, and this gets to really be that equitable piece, all of the assessment is done in a pictorial format. So it diminishes language barriers. The Nagliardi is a nonverbal assessment as well. That's other districts have looked at and have used. The difference between the COGAT and the Nagliardi is that the COGAT offers a verbal component. Another aspect of the COGAT that when we're looking at how does this information benefit all of our students and not just an identified gifted learner, it gives the, with the COGAT, you get a student profile. So educators can use that student profile to work with students' learning style strengths. It gives them recommendations tailored to each individual student. Those recommendations are also shared with the family in a family report. So a family can say, here is their strength. It also profiles where a student's weakness or greatest area of development to be. It gives the teacher instructional strategies tailored to that individual profile, and there is a plethora of resources available through the COGAT online resources that teachers can utilize as well as families. The board asked that we look at what and how do other districts identify. I will highlight a few of these. I believe in our study session we talked about that some districts will use achievement data as a qualifier. Sorry. Bear with me here. Patrick said I might jump from one area to the next. So South Washington County has their process in place. I am highlighting theirs because they had probably the most clear when I looked at what other districts were saying. So similar to what we talked about in the study session, how are they collecting that? When are they collecting it? Communication out to families. South Washington County does happen to be a district that uses achievement data as a qualifier for students to move to an ability assessment. I caution our district on that from an equity lens, that if we are using achievement data to look at potential ability, we're taking talent and saying this kid or student could be gifted, and we're not saying this student could be gifted and we need to develop their talents. So a big difference in how we want to capture those students. Centennial takes their identification process in with the programming that they offer. As does White Bear Lake. And I can click on just one more so that you can see, as districts have there's a variance in how they share the information to their communities, as well as how they go about identifying gifted learners. Were there other ones that you wanted me to click on, or you think you have a fair snapshot of? Okay. Mm-hmm. Sure. Statewide, we do, whether it is using achievement data to then put in place that a COGAT assessment. All of these districts use the COGAT, and you will find not only across the state of Minnesota the use of COGAT, but pretty much across the nation that using the COGAT to identify gifted and talented learners is what the nation is using. Because it's group administered, it has an element that speaks to underserved populations, which is a concern for gifted and talented services nationwide, and that it is a verbal, nonverbal, and quantitative.
Have we at any point in the last 7 years, was there ever a request to go back to using COGAT? Why, I'm trying to get to the bottom of why that wasn't
Why are we
pursued.
moving back to it?
Well, why we didn't pursue it before now? Because I think you've made a case for it.
We didn't have a GT person or coordinator or teacher to interpret the data or to assess the students.
So for 7 years, we went without one?
We did it for a short time, and then it went away, and then the next GT person that came in did not feel like that she wanted to put her code back in.
And I will say, in my 3 years being here, it has been a discussion element every year, not only with Dr. Larson and Lynn, but with building principals. And last year, we had a representative from COGAT come to speak to Wildwood and the teachers there about the benefits of having it. And there was some great feedback from the first grade teachers who were able to attend, that they felt that it was valuable information that they would receive, not just for a gifted learner, but for all of the learners in their classroom. So the next 2 slides cover the identification process. The first slide covers the initial identification process. So we can walk through that. I did lay it out in a systematic, trying to be as transparent as possible. In grade 1, all students will take the COGAT assessment. We will also collect data in the PETS assessment, which we talked about in the study session. We have the FAST assessment in grades 1 and 2. As we move to grade 2, all students will take the math and reading, students' measurement of academic process. We refer to it as MAP. All achievement data is collected. Then we have that component that I said was important, to reach out to parents and teachers to request their input. All of that information is collected and reviewed And then those scoring in the 98th and 99th percentiles will be identified as gifted learners. Communication will be sent out to all families that their child has been identified in our district as a gifted learner.
What about our students with test anxiety? It says heavily test at the top. I mean, so you've got the teacher and parent input. What about our kids who don't take standardized tests? It's a small number, and I know it's a small number, but we have a handful of kids who don't take any standardized tests by parent choice, which is federal law. So how do they work into this system?
Right. So in that piece of parent and teacher input, as well as when we are looking at that component of all achievement data, and when I say achievement, I'm not just thinking the MCAs. We are talking about kindergarten, first and second graders at this time. So it is that collection of work that we look at, teachers look at, that we can collect on a student. So I realize that when we see data, we may attach that it is a formalized assessment that we are giving. But when we look at achievement, we can look at various venues of how we show that achievement in a learner. So if we have a student or a family that may choose to opt out, then we would have to pursue other means of collecting that information that we would be able to review.
One other question. So is this math and reading?
So when we look at what MAP assessment collects, it is in math and reading. Those components is what the MAP assessment that we use collects information on.
What about the other assessments, though? Are those math only, or are they also reading, or I don't really know what they encompass entirely?
So FAST assessment is also math and reading based. The PETS assessment, as we talked in the study session, moves into that aptitude. So it is looking at the quantitative components of what a student is doing. It is also looking at their creative thinking skills. So that would be one element that we have that is not math and reading based.
Just to follow up, some kids, I think, score very high in math and not as high in literacy, and vice versa. Will they, if they're in 98th and 99th percentile in just reading but not math, will they be identified, or do they need to be in both? Or has
Great
that
question.
been decided yet?
Right. So I'm going to start first with the COGAT because we have the three areas. So a student could score in the 99th percentile in a nonverbal component and be in the 9th stay 9. And in their verbal component, they may be in the 4th stay 9. We would focus on that component where they are showing a 99th percentile score. So likewise, a student may score very well on the math MAP assessment, but may not score as well on the reading. When we see a score in the 98th, 99th percentile in either domain, it would be a student that we are seeing a talent in, and if they have a talent in it, then the ability is within them. Other questions? So the second component would be, what do we do as a district, realizing that a second grader is a very young learner? What do we do, and knowing that a ability in students as they are exposed to things, their ability does change. So we would recapture again. In 4th grade, all students would take the COGAT assessment. We collect data on students, their scoring in all grades. So again, that process, in 4th grade, they would have the COGAT. The new piece of information we would have in 3rd through 5th grade would be that they would have that MCA that would move into their achievement. So basically, the process is the same as in second grade. We would, again, check fourth graders with the COGAT for everyone, collect all of their information. Communication then would go out spring of fourth grade to families that their child, now as a fourth grader, has been identified as a gifted learner.
So I have a question relating to what the presentation Lynn just gave, where she says kids are identified in the middle school. In that services were provided in the middle school. And so I'm just curious how they're identified. Yeah, how they're identified.
So, are you currently, or are you speaking about?
I'm just identification after second grade.
Okay, so students moving into the middle school, we would have, if we are assessing them in fourth grade, we would have that information prior to them getting to the middle school.
So you would receive services in sixth, seventh, and eighth grade based on a fourth grade test? Is that what you're saying?
So students identified as a gifted learner in second grade, when we move into looking at services, we would want to be able to have services for any student that we identify as a gifted learner. The fourth grade, again, is that we're assessing everyone to make sure that we have not missed anyone in the district. Those students, we would gain additional students in fourth grade identified as a gifted learner. That information, if we look at collecting ability data again, we would want a 3-year stretch in that data collection. So there we would be looking at in 7th grade and in then them moving into high school, where right now they are self-selected, students self-select their class choices. So doing a recapture in 7th grade may not be the best use of district resources.
What about the students who are currently in 5th, 6th, and 7th, because they wouldn't be getting the 4th grade test?
Yes.
And they've not been identified because we did away with COGAT 7 years ago.
So if I can, so that was the process. If I can, that was another question that the board had asked, and I have it in a slide.
Oh, okay.
So if there are any other questions on this component, Julie, I'm hoping that when I talk about how are we making up the students, that I address your question. So when we look at the ability identification for current students, which was a request from the board, the cost per assessment is $11 per pupil. So we currently have 2nd through 7th grade students who have not taken part in the COGAT. That's 1,606 students. And we would look at the cost of, if we were to implement that next year, the cost being $17,666. Lynn did not think that that was a feasible option, so we looked at what is the plan then if we can't do an assessment of all of those students. How do we get those students the COGAT assessment? So when we look at students, current students in grades 2 and 3, those students will be assessed as 4th graders. We can also put in the option that if a family doesn't want to wait until their child is in 4th grade, the COGAT has that individual option. So a teacher or a parent may request the COGAT prior to the 4th grade year. Current students in grades 4th through 6th will move forward without an abilities assessment. If there is a question of an individual being gifted, teachers, parents, or students may recommend a student for the COGAT assessment. Julie, does that answer? Okay. The board also asked in the study session, how will we identify new students to our district? So, new students entering first grade, or sorry, the district after first grade and before fourth grade will be given the COGAT with myself, if I am a position next year, upon entering the district. If they are transferring in from a district that does not provide that data. If a district provides that data, we wouldn't need to recapture that student.
Since most districts are giving this already, does that come with the student, or is there ever a question of whether or not you have trouble getting it?
If it is a component that the district that they are coming from, if the COGAT is administered, those results are shared with our district when we ask for their transcripts. The piece that we may not, for a student, if it is a district such as South Washington County, where they have a prerequisite of scoring on achievement, then that student may not come in with it. Their district may have offered it, but they weren't assessed. So the next component. Yes.
We know we're not looking at services tonight.
Okay.
Were there specific questions the board asked around services, or you're sort of transitioning us to what happens next? I just want to make sure
there were 5 components that the board asked me in the study session to present on this evening, and there was a request to hear what our current services were. So
you provided that, but before you present it, can I ask the board if we can hold on that? Because the issue in front of us tonight is approving an assessment plan. We know we have questions around services, and I think we need to do a more comprehensive list of information that we're interested in and not dive into this tonight. If the board's okay with that, I'd like to skip this slide and dive into the assessment plan, the piece we do need to keep moving forward with in the interest of time. Can you shake or not, or?
If I can just, the reason I ask the question is because I think it's closely tied to how much we spend on assessing. I'm fine to skip it because I did attend the meeting earlier today, and so I have a much better handle on where we're at. So, but just so you understand, that's why I think it's still very important that the whole board should understand what we're providing, because
Right.
if we're spending a lot of money to assess them, then we should understand what we're getting for it.
Right. And remember, and correct me, Jen, if I'm wrong, please, the state requires us to identify.
Right.
And that's as far as it goes. We are not
Yes.
required to have a position. We're not required, there's no licensing gifted and talented. This is an area the state, I believe, has not done due diligence for our children who are identified. And that's what we're handed. And we do have budget pieces, and so I appreciate the budget numbers. But if we could concentrate now on the assessment plan, and if there are any other questions, let's pose those and then continue on. So do we have other questions on the plan as presented? Kevin?
No, I'm pretty good with the plan,
Okay.
but I do think that the community has spoken fairly substantially in that, what does all this mean? And so I would urge expeditious moving forward on the topic that seems to be at hand here about what we do as a district for people identified in these categories, so.
So would you be comfortable if Dr. Larson and I looked at the May and June study sessions and brought someone back to address the services piece at that point?
Yes.
Would that make sense?
Yep.
Is that timely enough?
Mhm.
Yes.
I'm just curious, how many times does the Gifted Advisory Board meet a year?
We do not have a gifted advisory board. That was absorbed into the.
So we have plan as presented in the slides to us at the study session with our follow-up questions answered, I believe. Is there a motion on the plan, or are there additional questions or information we need? How would you like to proceed?
So are we, because again, this has a budget number, and I feel more comfortable looking at the whole budget, so I'm a little, are we moving that we approve this, or
That's what I'm
approve
asking.
it in theory, or?
The budget number we have is not the budget number.
No,
mean,
I
that's the
know.
number of if we were to test all the kids, what is the annual cost? We don't have that. And the anticipated cost for this catch-up time frame, do we have those numbers? Well, even just the annual cost. And the fourth grade. We're gonna put enrollment numbers at first and fourth. Mhm. So the annual cost is anticipated to be about $4,000 to implement the plan. There's some additional costs probably the first couple years with those catch-up grades that we can't predict what that will be. You just can't. But
Right.
there would be some additional costs. Does that help, Stacy?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, thank you.
Other questions?
So we're just approving the process, we are just approving the COGAT.
Well, in the process to use the information and how it all comes together. Mhm. But we don't have, at this point, I mean, I know some of the websites, they communicate then what happens next. We're not ready for that phase yet. And that's not part of the statute.
Right. The statute is that we have an identification process
On world's best workforce.
on the world's best workforce.
But I would encourage us to get to that next step quickly. And I can go into that when we get to the meeting notes.
So May or June study session would be
Yes.
quickly enough.
Yes.
Would be timely. Okay. So do we have a motion to, yes, please.
We will be diving into the additional services
Right.
next year, starting next year, like what we need to add. In the May or June study session, we could share what we currently are providing, but we wouldn't be able to share what we're proposing by the end of the year, because we'd have to do some of the study with that, just so you're clear.
I-
But I
if
think
it's-
it would give the board an opportunity to provide input into that curriculum review process. I think that's part of, I mean, so yes, interesting to know what we're currently doing, and then some input to be sure questions are answered as you work and not after you're done. Any other questions, or can we have a motion to approve the plan, or other motion, whatever is?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion, a second, to approve the plan as presented. Any other discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Thank you very much. All right. Next item, reduction, 2017 OH Anderson open enrollment, window 2.5, and recommended budget reductions. Dr. Larson?
Thank you. Madam Chair, members of the board, the projected budget that the board, with the action that the board took at the April meeting, we accepted students in the window 2, and that helped close our budget gap. We are looking at adding about 53 students more at that meeting. We approved that than we had in 2016-17. The projected budget with the action that the board took about taking the additional students, about the reduction of some of the positions that we've had, and I want to really be extremely appreciative of the staff for some of the work that they've done, including retirements, eliminations of positions through course selections. Some staff have gone on job shares, and then students have aged up. So we've ended up losing 3 positions through the attrition of students, some other ones, and then we also did a one-time transfer of moving money from the assigned subsequent year budget to take care of that. The gap now is about $60,000 from where we were to where we are at the April meeting when we acted. At that April meeting, we also, I made a recommendation to the board to accept 13 students, 4 in 3rd grade, 4 in 4th grade, and 5 in 5th grade. The motion failed on a 3-3 tie, and so that came back to be reviewed at the study session that just happened last month. And so now the recommendation is that we're about $60,000 short, from where we are. If we look at enrollment, which is one of the pieces of this, that would take care of the budget situation. We'd be looking at about 130,000, which would put us over the 60,000 that we would need. Specifics, it would mean that we would have from grade 4, if we added 4 students in grade 3, that would generate roughly $42,000 of additional revenue, but it would put projected class sizes at 26.6, and that's above the metro average. And one thing when I'm talking about these numbers is that it sounds really exact, 26.6 and so on. These are based on the assumptions that we've built in of every student from 2nd grade coming to 3rd grade, the same number of move-ins, and all those students who have applied for open enrollment who have accepted. The second recommendation is that adding the 4 students, and these are first priority students in grade 4, again, that's about $42,000. Projected class size would be at 25.2, but that's below the metro average of 2015-16. And then adding students in grade 5, that would generate roughly $52,500 in additional revenue, but it put the projected class size at 27.2, and that's above the metro average of 26.6. That was a recommendation that I made at that time, and based on the budget and so forth, it was the same recommendation I would make this time. However, the board did ask for other possibilities. And these budget reduction possibilities come from the 2014 school year, in which we looked at all sorts of recommendations and different possibilities of reducing budgets. Some of the numbers are fairly round, and you'll see some that get a little bit more specific. Reducing the supply budget by 20,000, that's about 10%. Obviously, it would require more conservation and using some papers, office supplies, copies, that type of thing. The principals will have to monitor it closely, but that is a cut that we could make, I believe. We had talked at one time about eliminating the elementary specialists, and that's about $65,000 per building, and the information is in there that we have. I can go into more detail if you'd like, because you wanted to discuss these things. So, more detail?
Well, may I ask a question?
Sure.
This is all based on a 1.5% increase.
Right.
So there's still that factor out there, because if it goes to a 2% or even to a 1.75%, there won't be a deficit. And we won't know that for another 2 weeks.
So,
Hopefully.
No, they're not. Are you kidding?
So I think, we spent a lot of time at the study session going over all the numbers. We had good, deep conversation. We've had it multiple times. I'm not sure how much more we want to go over that. I think if, unless there's new information, Dr. Larson has shared the proposed or possible budget cuts in emails with us. We discussed them at the study session. Unless there's new information, can we just stick with the old information and try and move past not rehashing that? Maybe if each person has a statement to make in terms of where we stand, and then we have a motion and a vote. Because this is one of those items I think we could talk about for another 2 hours, and that is not in our best interest. So if you're okay with that, is there new information, Dr. Larson, on?
It's been shared with the board.
It's been shared with the board. So we have all the information. We don't need to go through it again. We've talked about it multiple times. Is there a motion that someone would like to make related to the recommendation in the board packet?
I would move that we accept these kids.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second on the floor. Discussion.
I'll repeat what I said the previous meeting, that I think we owe it to the students in 3rd, 4th, and 5th to make sure we understand what our numbers are, that we shouldn't be closing a possible budget deficit by bringing in students when we could very well end up having a surplus. I think we owe it to the current students to not increase their class sizes.
Mike, do you have a comment? We'll just go down the line here and we'll have a vote.
I don't want to see people lose their jobs, and that has a direct effect on our local economy if we went with budget cuts. Accepting these students will cover the gap, and we are still on a downward trend for class sizes. And so I believe we need to accept those students.
I feel like accepting these students right now is premature. I think we have windows left where we can approve them at a later date.
I think we should accept them. They're priority 1 students, and I don't think adding those few children into the class of 4th grade will really change much significantly. And our principals have all said that they can support this and that there's room and space and without jeopardizing the outcomes for the students.
When is the next window?
June 9th or 8th.
The June board meeting.
It would seem to me that since, again, the biggest chunk of money that comes from, or funding for us, comes from the state, and it's hard to make a budget when we don't know what 68% of our funding looks like. So, I mean, I'm hoping that in 2 weeks we'll have the final, but there's still some stuff going on. So I'd be okay waiting until June.
One thing I do want to point out is that in the 2015-16 school year, our enrollment was 3299. In 2016-17 this year, it was 3221. We approved enough open enrollment to get us to 3274, and then if we took on these other ones, we'd be at 3287. So we're up 66 from this year, but we're still down from 2015-16 in terms of, the question was about enrollment in the buildings.
Kelly?
One other thing, the last fall, when we were kind of licking our wounds about why a bunch of students that we thought were coming didn't come, and I think the idea that was bantied about was that they were held back. Yep. So.
Somewhere, yes.
So that would mean, though, that this year, they would well come.
They're already included in the count.
They are. Okay. So we're comfortable with that?
That's in first grade, yes. We're comfortable. And kindergarten, yes.
So Robert's rules allows people to speak twice to an item. Kevin's spoken twice. Anyone else want a second statement? I've not made a statement. I am also hesitant to approve them with the budget situation from the state unsettled, the next window being so close. I lean towards not accepting them at this time, but we each have our opinions. So we have a motion to accept them, and we have a second for that motion, and we've had discussion, so now we need a vote on that motion. All those in favor of accepting the 13 students, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, please say nay.
Nay.
Motion does not pass. Do we need a motion to waitlist them further, or what happens now with the listing?
We didn't close the grade level, so they're
They'll
still.
stay on the list. All right, next item on the agenda. Returning to, we have two contracts we did not address because we don't have a full budget picture. We know from HR that we have till July 1st on that, is that correct? And these still proposed budget cuts?
That we would act in June.
We'd act in June. Are these still proposed budget cuts then? I mean, because we don't have a budget picture is what we're saying, is that correct?
These were never proposed budget cuts from my perspective. The question that was raised was, if we made these budget reductions, what would be the impacts? And so that was the document that I shared. Specifically in terms of gifted and talented coordinator, there's dedicated funding, line 438, that is for $47,843. That's money that comes this way. The difference in salary is about $10,000. And so that reduction would be rather minimal. The position does the coordination of acceleration process for students. There's some direct instruction, and there's the advocacy piece. The other one that was on the item was about the PBIS. And the Positive Behavior Intervention Program is something that we've done for a long time, that these positions provide the help for students and families. We're seeing more difficult students than we have before. You heard from me, I think it was last board meeting or 2 board meetings ago, about the district management group recommendations. They're being implemented, and so I believe we'll have better programming as a result. However, reduction of a partial-time school psychologist for behavior intervention can happen. We have 4 of them in the buildings. You can go down to either 3 or a larger number, but neither of these are recommendations from administration.
So, I guess I'm a little confused now. The items that were put forward that I thought were budget reductions weren't budget reductions, because the board had asked for budget reductions in December.
Right. The budget reductions that we made were the second grade teacher, 3rd grade teacher, literacy coach. Then there were some combinations of retirements and elimination of some positions through students' course selections at the secondary level, and those were all the reductions that we had. Then the other pieces to make up the deficit included the one-time transfer from the subsequent year budget. The document that I presented was the budget reduction impacts. The question that the board asked was, what would happen if we did, say, eliminate an elementary specialist? Excuse me. So I listed that in the detail here. What would happen if we eliminated supplemental math support? And then it goes through all of that. These were never recommendations, these were impact statements.
So we still have 2 contracts that we need to address, or we need to table until the next meeting. Is there a motion? Can we do them together, or do they need to be separate?
I think they need to be separate because they were
different.
separated.
Right,
in
there's
that.
different types of contracts.
I think we need to accept them, just because of where we're at right now with everything. It's all up in the air, and I don't see why we would table it. Especially with, there were impact statements, they weren't actual functioning, this is what's gonna happen. So, we should accept them.
Any other statements or motions on either of these positions? Motion?
I think we should accept them as well. I think there are services that will be needing going forward, and I think they aren't a huge impact on the bottom line here, and I agree, you did a really good job listing all those things as an impact statement, not as a recommendation for the budget. I think we should accept them.
So we're making a motion?
I move that we accept them.
It'd technically be 2 motions, but.
Okay.
Because they're different contract movements, so let's do the first one, where we can the gifted and talented position. You're moving to accept the gifted and talented position to.
Probationary to continuing contract.
Yes, thank you.
That's my motion.
Second.
I have a question.
Okay. Discussion, yep, go ahead.
Okay, discussion, thank you. So, because the position is .8, does that mean it has to remain .8? What if we, at some point, decide we need to, because as I'll share, the community is asking for more focus on this. What if we need to increase this? I was worried that then we're locked into a .8 time, and then what does that mean? I guess I thought we might get into it in the budget discussion, but.
We can add positions at any time, budget permitting. Like, for example, if the percentage that the state comes up with is 2% as opposed to the budgeted 1.5, that would indicate that there might be a bit of a balance that we can do some different things with, and that could be part of it. Right now, though, if we're budgeting on a 1.5 and we're still $60,000 short of where we need to be, I can't recommend an increase in the position.
But, Stacy, are you trying to ask, it's a .8 position now, so is that person tied to a .8 position, or are they tied to?
Yeah, are we then locked in?
Oh, that contract is for a .8, but we can increase the contract.
You could, or you could add another position, and it's not, I guess you're not locked out of doing that.
No, no.
Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Same thing, which, that's very similar to what we did with, say, 3rd grade a couple of years ago. You know, we added a teacher there in 3rd grade.
But I think you're questioning more, it's a .8.
Right, we're locked in a
No.
contract, so then I thought that, okay.
Do you have an answer? Are you comfortable?
Yes.
Okay. I have a motion and a second on the floor. There's some discussion, other discussion? All those in favor of the motion to approve item 2D from probationary continuing, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
Okay, motion fails, so it's a 3-3 vote. So we'll return to that one in the next board meeting in June. Item 3N was tabled till now, which is the PBIS position.
I'm sorry, I said PBIs, I should have said school psychologist.
That's what I was wondering, okay.
Yeah.
So this is the school psych position. I'm going to move that we approve that position.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion on the school psych position? All All those in favor of approving position 3N from, who will to continue on probationary status for 17-18, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. So we'll return to the minutes. School board committee reports, AMSD.
Finally, towards the end here. The Ad hoc Committee on Integration and Equity was wrapping up its World Cafes. They've had an attendance of 3,000 people so far, with lots of rich, innovative ideas, and as well as ideas that people have been talking about for a number of years. And they are reviewing the data for all of the cafes. They're analyzing the data and hoping to have a report prepared sometime in June, which we will all get to see. Minnesota Education Equity Partnerships Executive Director, Representative Carlos Mariani Rosa, gave a presentation on equity and the goals of the partnership. He is also the DFL lead on the Education and Innovation Committee. In a nutshell, their strategic plan consists of 5 major goals, which he expanded on. I have a copy of their annual report if you'd like to take a look. The goals are race matters, equity matters, justice matters, critical thinking and self-actualization matters, history matters, and relationship matters. This is a very interesting report. That's my report.
EEA, Kevin?
Okay, I actually have a report this time. We've had 2 meetings this year, and so we had the last meeting, the second one, just this past week. And they went through and reviewed what had been done this year. There was work on the Youth Leadership Council, and the Mahtomedi High School worked on understanding privilege. Tartan worked on, and this again, so everyone knows, because we haven't talked about it much, this is the alliance that we have between 832 Mahtomedi and North St. Paul, Maplewood, Oakdale, 622. Tartan High School worked closer look at Tartan traditions, and North High School looked at tracking stereotypes. There is a, they had a Midwest winner of a Scholastic Art and Writing Award came, and this woman, Stella Benyon, was honored at the White House in 2016, and she came and gave a presentation at North High School, and by all accounts, it was a very amazing young woman. I think, you know, my comment was, I wish I had known about it, I would have gone myself. It looked really pretty cool. Then there was a writing workshop cohort trying to work on strategies to look at cultural and linguistic responsive teaching strategies. Say that 3 times fast. Then there was an 8th to 9th grade transition group, and this actually, White Bear joined this as well. This is, you know, that transition from 8th to 9th grade is tough, and so this is something that EEA was looking at as well. Looking ahead, I think one of the comments that I had anyway was maybe we need another meeting or 2 in the year to kind of fully feel engaged in this, because I, as the representative, didn't. And I've asked that maybe we have something, maybe not monthly, but every other, something that I can report on coming from our coordinator. So, and then I also suggested that maybe we do a common book read between the 2 districts, and of course I suggested the book that we just read for the board. So that's my report.
Do we know where the transition program, 8th, 9th transition program is legislatively? Has that fallen off, or is that?
It's fallen off. It may come back in the conference committee, but as of right now, I'm not confident.
I didn't see it, but I wasn't sure.
I didn't see it either, and the other piece is that, I don't want to get into speculation, but you hear a lot of rumors around the Capitol, and sites have dug in, and so it's not a good time necessarily for educational funding.
Right. So, Kevin, do you know, will the transition program move forward with or without funding, or is it dependent upon funding?
It's dependent upon funding.
Yeah, that's what I would assume, yeah.
That's why I assumed
Yep.
questions first. Thank you.
Although the high school will be doing some things with the LINK program, or something very similar next year to link 8th graders to be more successful as freshmen or first years.
School Board Association?
School Board Association, let's see, again, our lobbying team is, I think, along with Stacy, they're probably spending nights down there in St. Paul getting the cots out and, but a lot of action there and a lot of things kind of going out and coming from the government affairs team. I would urge people to stay really dialed into that. They occasionally will say, hey, we need some help here. It's a lot of good stuff. I mean, we really, that 2% is what we need. And, you know, it's depending on the day, I'm like, yeah, I think we can get this. And then on a down day, I'm like, but there is some pressure starting to come to bear, and it all seems to come down to the very end. I guess that's human nature. So.
As board members, we received at least 2 emails from people asking us to write to legislators. I hope everyone's taking the opportunity to send. My emails are only 2 lines long, but I'm making sure they know we want 2%.
Send them, right.
You need to send them because they're counted, you know, so if you haven't done that yet.
I did, yep.
And for anybody that has a Twitter account, and if you've got any kind, you know, that works. I mean, it's just amazing. The people will bounce one after another, and it just starts to amplify. So, yeah, the next week, Thursday and Friday, we have the annual MSBA Board of Directors meeting in St. Peter. So all of us drive down to St. Peter and have a 2-day meeting to set the stage for next year and set the budget. There will be a slight increase on the membership dues, but it'll be very, very nominal. Again, probably less than what we're going to get from the state as a percentage. August 8th, summer seminar. So if everyone wants to take a look and see if they're not traveling, and Laura, if you want to, at some point, maybe send something out and gauge interest on that. And there also is Phase 1 and Phase 2 training on August 9th. So that's the MSBA report.
Am I still need to do Phase 2 training, is that right?
Yep, I'm signing up already, yeah, I'm good.
So Mike, I would guarantee, I saw a thing on Refresher, and it's kind of like taking your marriage vows again. And so I would be willing to, as a mentor, go with you on that. I think I can go for free.
All right.
And get a refresher. It's always good stuff.
I did that when Stacy took her training in January, and it was very worthwhile to go again.
The great thing is you can take them out of order. You can just keep, you know, take them as many times as you want.
But that's the one required by statute within. Right?
Yeah, I'd like to review that sometime with you. But.
Okay, Northeast Metro 916, I saw it in the board packets.
The bulk is in the board packet, but I do want to highlight the foundation, the 916 Foundation actually did at our awards night the other night, did award some scholarships from the foundation to our kids. We had one, Mitchell Bradley got one with the EMT program. Brock Halverson got one as part of the construction operations program. Tom Zelmer got one as part of automotive technician. And he also got a second one from a tire company, again for automotive.
Benberg Tire.
Benberg Tire.
Yeah.
And so these are dollars that came back to us from the foundation that we participate in, and these are kids who might not necessarily have gotten other kinds of support, so it's really good. I also would pitch that the foundation is having a golf event. I don't golf.
But you can donate.
Well, they'll take people just for the dinner. They have the hole-in-one contest. I mean, but they'd love to have participants of.
So you can just go for the dinner?
Yeah, yes, you can.
This, the 13th.
I think it's June 13th. But they're really looking to increase the participation and would like to have a team from everyone of the participating school districts, you know, if we could manage that, because it's the second largest fundraiser that the foundation does.
I'd be happy to go for dinner.
Laura, can you send an email out to the board and coordinate that on our behalf, and then let Judy know who's going, so she's not in the dark representing that board? Do we need donations for that as well? It's not the gala where they're doing the
No, this isn't a.
They would take donations, and I think we could also sponsor a whole if we're not able to attend.
Right, you could use donations for that, that's right.
Yes.
I don't know
So
what that
those are
costs to
just
sponsor a
thoughts.
whole.
Or maybe in the email we can decide what, if people can attend, maybe how we can.
We can't decide in email, it's open meeting law violation.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
You can't
It's-
make decisions in email.
I guess I should find out what it costs to sponsor a hole.
Right, that's what I'm missing.
I can send that out.
Get the
or
details of
Give
that.
it to Laura.
I'm gonna guess it's $300, $200 to $300. That's just typically what I see the holes go for in a lot of these things.
I mean, for our foundation, and, I mean, this is our foundation as well. because
This
we're
is our
part of-
foundation as
right.
well.
But the other foundations we're a part of, we've donated tables and other things, and so I would support all board members supporting this by donating equal amounts to that. As long as it's, I mean, for one said, I think the last donation we did was $500, so if it's less than 500 or less, to go ahead and move forward with that, if the board's okay with that, and then Laura will let us know how much we'll.
What else,
each-
I could probably pull this up here in a sec.
I agree with that.
I think it depends on the equal amounts.
Are you shopping?
No, I was trying to double check that MSBA date, August 9th, was it? Yeah.
All right, superintendent, or any other committee reports?
Well, can I just talk a little bit about the meeting this morning, the PTO meeting? I know Mike wasn't able to be there, and Kevin was there for the first part, and I was there for the whole time. We have a number of parents who are very, very engaged in our school and are very concerned about the Gifted and Talented program. And I think they express that they've been very patient. They've been trying to get the kind of instruction for their kids that best meets their family's needs. But I'm afraid that we have a number of people who are very frustrated, and they're reaching a point. I've had 4 people contact me between yesterday and today saying they are either transferring their student out of our district or they're considering it. It was a very intense meeting, and I think we need to really listen to these concerns. And I said I would bring it back to the board. They want to know what else they can do. Lynn was there, Jen was there, they answered their questions. Lynn welcomed them to be part of the committee going forward, but I know that there's still concern that there's a whole, another year before there's any kinds of changes in the classroom. So I don't know if we can look at anything that are possible changes that could take place this fall. I don't know what the options are, but I think it's worth meeting with them and saying, these are possibilities. I think people want to see changes yesterday, and their message was very clear. And, you know, as a parent of young kids, I understand. They want their child to have what we all want our kids to have. And we do a great job in this district. We are a great school district, but we can always do better.
I was there for the first half hour, and I completely echo what Stacy is saying. What I would like to know is, again, I think there's a sense of urgency on this, but what I'd like to know is what we appropriate for this programming as a district compared to a like district with a similar number of students with a similar demographic. And the district that oftentimes we've compared ourselves with is Orono. I think that would be pretty easy to call over there and say, how much resources do you dedicate to your Gifted and Talented program? That would be a nice kind of starting point to find out, are we even in the game, or, you know, I think that would be a great place to go, because they're like us. Whereas Centennial and the other ones, as interesting as they may be, are not like us in many ways. So, but I think, again, the sense of urgency was crystal clear. And, you know, some of the people were talking about the board and why don't you put more into this? And it's like, well, that's not our purview. I mean, we certainly can, you know, weigh in and talk about it, but ultimately that's management. So, but I really do think we need to, based on what I heard today, move this along to get to some kind of a.
So it sounds like Lynn was there to give the feedback, as was Jen, so they've got the feedback from the parents too, to start looking at their questions and things. And I think we have to be fair. They have the opportunity to respond to the parents, but I think oftentimes there's a bigger picture that might not be able to be presented in the time the parents have to answer to gain answers. So if we could return to the whole picture in that May or June study session based upon what it works for the schedule and what works in terms of you being able to gather information and data and responses, I think might be the best thing, because we could go on, now, but I think in the interest of time, if we could just table that and have that all come back in that May or June study session. We'll look at it. Part of it is we've got to look at the calendar too, so we can all connect and look at that calendar, see how quickly we can get to it. So, are there any other reports? If not, Dr. Larson, you have a report.
Thank you. Sure. The month of May is a great month in so many ways, with so many different and terrific activities. For example, today was a 4th grade program over at O.H. Anderson. Tomorrow's also the 4th grade, but they've had the 3rd grade and the 5th grade as well. They've had music productions. I wanted to speak mostly to the quality of the community that we see here. For example, at the play, when I went to Legally Blonde on Friday night, I was told by you, Lucy, that there were only 19 empty seats, the largest crowd I'd seen. A lot of students there, but a lot of non-students. It looked like families were coming there for the enjoyment and the terrific performances that were there. At the scholarship night last night, it was an amazing outpouring of community support as well, giving the students what they'll need to get to be successful at college and donating tremendous amounts of money. And then on Friday, I was grandfather for a day and a substitute one, and there was only one student that did not have a grandfriend or a grandparent there, which was just remarkable, because grandparents oftentimes don't always live in the same area and they move away and so on. But it just speaks to the quality of the community and the amount of care and compassion that they have for our students. And for that, I'm just very thankful, and also thankful for a really great year and looking forward to graduation on June 10th.
Thank you. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Meeting adjourned.
They might want